Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Rebellious Wellness Lifestyle. I had to think for a minute, where am I? Today, my guest is Dr. Ravi Kumar. He is a neurosurgeon and still practicing, but he's really concerned with getting scientifically sound information out, information that's based on research, proven research, not just there was this one study with 11 people in it, and it proves that statins are important. And he's a bit of a rebel like me. According to his research, there are many things that are being put out there by Western medicine that perhaps don't have the same weight as they used to. Like maybe the science is old and we've learned more these days. And I think that's a good part of it. So today we're going to talk about whatever comes up, but my main thing is for my women listeners at midlife and beyond to understand the heart disease, right? There was a woman who's very well known on social media, and I got on her list just to see what she was saying. She runs a health clinic out in Arizona, and the title of the email was "Everybody will eventually get heart disease." And I thought, I, can you weigh in on that? Is that really true? All of us are at some point going to get some kind of heart disease?
No, it's not. Heart disease is a major morbidity in the Western world, and it has been for close to 100 years. But no, that's not true. We have epidemiological studies that show some people never develop heart disease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friends and I just found out that one of our friends' mothers died at 102. No medication, no signs of anything, just was fine, and she went to sleep.
Yeah. Gregory, and should I call you Gregory?
You
Is
can call
that
me Greg. Greg is fine.
Greg? Okay,
Yeah.
Greg. So, what matters is not so much the medications we take or what supplements we're taking. It's about how we live. And there's the major factors that cause cardiovascular disease are inflammation, and inflammation. So if you keep that in check, and a lot of people just naturally do, they just naturally go down the path of living well. And when you live well, your body's not inflamed. There's
Mhm.
obviously some things we can do to make sure that happens. But if you don't live well, you don't exercise, you eat poorly, you smoke, you don't control your blood pressure, then you develop what we call systemic inflammation. And that's at the root of all diseases, pretty much
Mm.
cardiovascular disease, neurodegeneration, bone mineral density, you name it.
Does it impact mitochondria too? Because I know mitochondrial
Yeah.
health is important.
Yeah. Mitochondrial health is a linchpin in metabolic health. So if you have poor mitochondrial health, you're going to be inflamed because you're not producing enough energy. So your body sounds the alarm bells saying,
Mm.
hey, we're not getting enough energy. Pump out the inflammatory cytokines, which are these chemicals that circulate through our body, and you become inflamed. And systemic inflammation leads to disease.
So I have to move on to remedies for, or treatments, I should say, for heart disease. Clearly, if somebody needs surgery, that because they're at that stage, then fine, there's surgery. There is a more popular remedy in Western medicine called statins to keep people off the operating table. I have a pretty strong opinion about who gets them, like too many people is my thought. And the fact that they do come with risks and side effects, the fact that I literally stood in a doctor's office with my husband. He is not on a statin, but they wanted to put him on one. The doctor said, you'll be on it for the rest of your life, because we were talking about side effects. And I said, and won't the side effects compound over time? And he said, that's possible. We could take him off. If he's on 5 or 6 meds by the time he's 75, we'll just get rid of the statin. And I just wanted to run screaming from the room. Not that the guy is bad. That's what he's
Yeah.
being taught to put forth as a solution for heart disease. So let's talk about statins a little bit. How do you feel about them?
I think statins, their benefits over exaggerated and their side effects are underreported. So it's one of those drugs that, and one, it makes a lot of money. There's about
Mhm.
$15 billion a year in
Wow.
statin sales. So it is something statins are the most lucrative drugs ever invented. And to understand, I'm not anti-statin. I'm not,
Good.
but I think everyone needs to understand that they only benefit a very narrow group of people. Okay. And those are people who have cardiovascular disease and
Mm.
are high risk.
Okay.
And they don't necessarily, and they do have significant side effects, which are like I said, underreported. They don't necessarily need to be taken by people who are asymptomatic or low or even moderate risk. So I think it comes down, when I think of statins, I first of all think, what's the benefit and what's the risk? So if we look at, I think we even need to step further back and say, what are statins actually doing to our body?
Yeah, good
You know,
question. Yeah, what are they doing?
so they're lowering LDL cholesterol. That's what they're doing. And they're doing it by inhibiting an enzyme called HMG coenzyme A reductase. And it's this enzyme in the cholesterol synthesis pathway that basically makes cholesterol. So you make cholesterol in your body. We all do. All animals do. And cholesterol is essential to life. Without cholesterol, you can't live. All your cell membranes depend on cholesterol for their integrity. You make vitamin D with cholesterol. You make hormones with cholesterol. They are essential to life. We make them mostly in our liver, and then we transport them throughout our body using a carrier called LDL. Okay. And LDL essentially delivers cholesterol to the cells of our body so they can grow, repair, heal. So anytime you have any kind of injury, whether you cut your arm, get some endothelial injury from stress, a workout, maybe you smoke cigarettes or you're next to a campfire, whatever it is, you've got some cellular injury, LDL responds to deliver cholesterol to repair the cell. Okay.
I bet that's a fascinating bit that not too many people know.
No, yeah.
You never hear about the good stuff that it's doing.
Yeah, cholesterol is a repair molecule. It is a survival molecule. And okay, so in the synthesis of cholesterol, there's over 20 enzymes. And these are like fine-tuned molecular machines that took millions of years to evolve perfectly to create this one molecule that we depend on for life. And in one of those enzymes is HMG coenzyme A reductase, and that is the target of statins. And it's also the rate limiting enzyme, meaning when HMG coenzyme A reductase slows down, the whole synthesis of cholesterol basically grinds to a halt, or at least slows down significantly. So if you inhibit that one enzyme with a statin, you stop making cholesterol at the same level, and your cholesterol levels drop, including your LDL packages of cholesterol. Okay, so there's this drug. And the other thing to know about statins is they're actually fungal toxins.
I was going to ask you that if I was correct.
Yeah, so they come from fungus. Fungus use them to hurt animals. So if you got some decomposing matter, right? A fungus gets into it and says, oh, this is good stuff. And then a worm or some grub shows up to eat too. The fungus are like, no, we don't want you here. This is ours. Let's make this statin drug, which is exactly what they do. It either kills or hurts the worm and it goes away so that the fungus has full control over this resource. And researchers back in the 70s figured that out. They're like, oh, hey, statins can inhibit our ability to make cholesterol. Let's give it at metered doses, not to kill the patient, but to slow the cholesterol production down. Okay. And because the idea at the time was that high cholesterol causes heart disease.
Right.
And that's how we got into this industry where pharmaceutical companies have been pumping out cholesterol lowering drugs, including statins, for the last 50 years. And there's this infatuation with driving cholesterol as low as possible, even though it has vital functions in our body. So that's how we ended up here with statins.
Yeah. And when I was reading about what statins were made from, I guess it was a mycotoxin. And I heard the word toxin and I thought, I wonder how they translate that into something non-toxic, but it is still. And I also have heard that they can impact the mitochondrial function, the pathway, the biological pathway.
Absolutely. So that enzyme we talked about that statins inhibit, well, downstream from that in the same synthesis pathway are two molecules that are made called coenzyme Q10. You can buy a supplement form of that, and heme A, which you can't get through oral intake. Both coenzyme Q10 and heme A are vital for mitochondrial energy production. So when you take a statin, you become very quickly deficient in coenzyme Q10 and heme A, and your mitochondrial energy production crashes. So how does that affect people? People get muscle pain and weakness, which movement is like the number one thing for longevity.
Yes.
You got to move to live. And as soon as you stop moving, you stop living. People on statins, about 10% of people on statins develop myalgias, which is muscle pain and weakness. So statins inhibit that enzyme we talked about called HMG coenzyme reductase. And downstream of that enzyme are two molecules that are produced, which are inhibited when you take statins, and that's coenzyme Q10 and heme. So when those molecules are inhibited, they're crucial for mitochondrial energy production. You can't make energy without those two molecules.
Mm.
And so when you take a statin, you reduce the production of those two compounds, and your mitochondrial energy production crashes. So how does that present clinically? People start getting muscle pain. And when they get muscle pain, they stop moving. And when they stop moving, they get metabolically less healthy. And it becomes this vicious cycle because they're basically inhibiting their ability to move and produce energy. The other thing is that statins inhibit the production of those same molecules in the heart and in the brain. So people can develop cardiomyopathy. In fact, statin-induced cardiomyopathy is very well defined in the literature, and dementia. So one important thing about cholesterol is one really neat thing about cholesterol is the brain, which I operate on. It's a gelatinous substance. 25% of your body's cholesterol, total cholesterol, is in the brain.
Wow.
It is vital to the integrity of the brain because the brain is this fatty gelatinous substance, and it's myelinated, meaning it's insulated with cholesterol so that all the nerves fire and signal properly. And the brain cannot get cholesterol from your body. So meaning if you eat cholesterol or your liver makes cholesterol, the brain doesn't get any of it. It makes its own cholesterol.
Wow.
So it is completely self-sufficient in cholesterol production. It makes it in these cells called astrocytes in the brain. So now imagine you're taking a statin, and this statin crosses the blood-brain barrier, because many of them do. All of a sudden, your brain, which its only source of cholesterol is its self-production, is inhibited, meaning it cannot make cholesterol anymore. And cholesterol is what it's essentially made of. And so all of a sudden, now you're inhibiting your brain's ability to make cholesterol, and the brain starts to basically lose its integrity because it can't get cholesterol from the body, and you've sent the drug up into the brain to inhibit its ability to make cholesterol. And that's why they've shown studies where they've taken dementia patients who are on statins, they take their statins away, and all of a sudden their mental status exams improve. And then they give them back the statin, and their mental status exams crash. And it's not talked about, and it's not further studied. The studies are all pretty small, and they don't do larger studies. So I think that, and there's a reason, because I think generally the pharmaceutical companies don't want to know, and they're the ones who fund these studies.
Or they know, or they don't want to publish because that would put a damper on there. I'm going to ask you, I have read a couple of different places that the increased rates of Parkinson's and possibly other neurodegenerative disease processes are related to statins, long-term high-dose statins. Does that sound possible to you?
It sounds possible. We don't have definitive evidence to show that.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't. But we do know, like I said, that the brain makes all its own cholesterol. The statins can go up into the brain, inhibit the brain's ability to make its cholesterol. And it just common sense tells you that as soon as you prevent the brain from making the molecule that it's dependent on for proper functioning, the brain's probably not going to function properly anymore.
Yeah.
I think a lot of medicine, we ignore common sense, and that's just a common sense observation.
It's almost there's no room for common sense because there's so much data, research, study groups, this and that, and
Yeah, and we forget that we don't see the forest through the trees.
So I know that you are a supplement lover, some supplements, and you talk a lot about zinc. And I'm curious about that because I think about zinc when you get a cold or a cold sore or something, but other than that, I don't really know what it does. Can you tell me?
Yeah, this is what I'll say about supplements. I am pro supplement when you can't get it from food.
Okay.
But my general philosophy is that all your nutrients should come from food when possible.
Okay.
And if you can't get it from food because modern lifestyle and available foods, then we should supplement.
Okay.
Zinc is one of those that if you're an omnivore, you most likely can get your zinc needs met. That being said, 2 billion people, which is about 20% of the world, is zinc deficient. And zinc is one of those molecules that you can't, micronutrients that you just can't live without. Many of your proteins depend on it. Your gene transcription depends on it. That's the ability to read your genes and produce RNA and proteins from them. It is like essentially a cornerstone of all your molecular machinery and much of your molecular machinery in your body. So being zinc deficient is really bad. If you're a vegetarian or vegan, you have a high chance of being zinc deficient because much of the zinc in plant foods is tied up by molecules called phytates, which are these compounds, phosphorus compounds in plants that basically chelate or wrap around zinc molecules, and you can't absorb them after you eat them. If you eat meat, you're likely probably just getting around the right amount, which is about 15 to 20 milligrams per day. What I tell people about zinc is you can't afford to be low on it because nothing in your body will work properly. And you can't go over because if you take too much zinc, you'll start becoming copper deficient. So it's one of those things where I say, eat good, high quality, omnivorous diet. So that's meat and vegetables and plant foods. And if you're vegetarian or vegan, you got to take a supplement. And I recommend zinc glycinate, probably about 15 milligrams a day for vegetarians and vegans.
Will they notice anything? A lot of times we take a supplement, we don't notice, but it's still having an effect on the body.
If they're zinc deficient, they'll all of a sudden realize that their body starts clicking.
Oh.
They might be dragging energy.
Interesting.
Production, tissue integrity, bones and skin. Everything becomes better, essentially, once you start taking zinc, if you're zinc deficient. In fact, zinc deficiency is fatal. There's one deficiency called acrodermatitis enteropathica, where kids are born with the inability to absorb zinc because one of the transporters in their intestines don't work for absorbing the zinc. And this was universally a death sentence up until the 1970s.
Wow.
Then they realized that, hey, these kids are zinc deficient, and they start giving them zinc and they live normal lives.
Wow.
By just supplementing with zinc. But that just shows how crucial it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what about vitamin C? I know that there's C's nowadays. How many milligrams? What's the deal?
Vitamin C is a very interesting and crucial vitamin. It is one, I would say this, we can't make vitamin C. Right. But many of the animals in the animal kingdom can make vitamin C. And they make and they make all the vitamin C they need. They make it from glucose. Yeah. And we lost that ability many millions of years ago in one of our evolutionary ancestors, because our ancestors are not the same species as us, but who we evolved from. They were eating so much vitamin C throughout the day that it just there was no consequences to a mutation in that gene because they had all the vitamin C they needed. And so now here we are, human beings who can't make vitamin C, but we have certain requirements for vitamin C to maintain all our antioxidant capabilities in our body, our collagen synthesis, gene expression, all sorts of things that vitamin C does. And many of us are vitamin C deficient because we just don't get enough. The RDA for vitamin C is about 90 milligrams per day. That's not enough. That just keeps you out of scurvy land. Because when you don't get enough vitamin C, you get scurvy, and that's what these sailors used to get when they would have no plants. They wouldn't eat any plants for 3 months or something like that. And 90 milligrams keeps you out of scurvy. But to optimize your biology, to optimize your antioxidant defenses, to keep yourself from getting cancer and degenerative diseases from oxidative stress, you need quite a bit more. So what I do is I usually take about 500 milligrams twice a day of vitamin C. And I do that for myself, my children. My children take 500 milligrams once a day. But the studies have shown that keeps a steady state of vitamin C in the body. Now, when you get sick or stressed, vitamin C requirements are much higher because your body starts burning through it. And you don't store vitamin C. You don't have natural stores of vitamin C. It's a water-soluble vitamin. You pee it out when you have more than you need. But as soon as you get sick, it's like you need a massive amount more vitamin C. So when you get sick, I recommend taking much more vitamin C. You're taking it every few hours throughout the day. And it's not just viruses. If you're stressed out, you're grieving, you've got an injury, or you injured yourself, or you've had a surgery. In these situations where the body's under stress, you need to increase your vitamin C consumption dramatically.
Yeah, I have heard that before. Stress, boy, stress is a hard,
Yeah.
hard on the body. The other day, I was speaking to somebody, not a doctor, but in the health space, and we didn't have time, but we wanted to talk about seed oils. And I know that you have written about seed oils. It's crazy how many people are still on the side of any oil is okay, don't worry about it, where
Yeah.
there are many more people, I think, saying they're not great for you. I read about canola oil like 15 years ago and how they make it and they bleach it and they sterilize it and they deodorize it
Mhm.
because it smells so bad. Anyway, I would like to hear what your take is on the whole seed oil controversy.
Okay, I don't think it's really a controversy. You'd have people taking both sides of an issue all the time, right?
True.
But
It's
when the overwhelming amount of evidence is in one area, you just have to say this is the probabilistic truth, okay? And the fact is that none of our ancestors ever put a teaspoon of seed oil in their mouth. It just
mhm,
didn't exist. It's an industrial process. So what a seed oil is basically, you take a seed like corn, soybean, cottonseed, safflower seed, and this is a seed is not oily, but it has a tiny amount of oil in the germ of the seed,
mhm.
essentially the embryo. You mill these seeds because you want the carbohydrates. You want the endosperm, which is like the corn flour, the wheat flour, the soy flour. And when you mill it, if you leave that tiny amount of oil in, the flour actually goes rancid. So you can't, industrially, they just can't leave the oil in there. So they take a byproduct of petroleum distillation called, it's a component of gasoline. And hexane is very toxic, by the way, but it basically solubilizes oil, meaning when you mix it with oil, they mix together. Oil and water don't mix,
Right.
right? Hexane and oil, they mix. And so you grind up these soybeans and then you stir them up in a bath of hexane. Okay. And then you wash out the hexane, and hexane now has the soybean oil in it. So it's essentially pulled the soybean oil out of the flour, the meal, soybean meal. And then you take the soybean meal and you sell that as food. Okay. And then you take the hexane and you evaporate it. And what's left behind is the soybean oil. And what are you going to do with soybean oil? You're going to sell it. You're going to sell it as vegetable oil. I mean, it's marketing gold, because
Mhm.
this is something, yeah, we ate soybeans in ancestral history, but the amount of oil that we would get from soybeans was tiny. And
Yeah.
we're talking about fractions of a gram. Now, all of a sudden, you're putting a cup of vegetable oil in your brownie mix, which is just this extraordinary amount of an oil that contains a very pro-inflammatory compound called linoleic acid. And what overconsumption of seed oil does, which is what we do now because it's ubiquitous throughout our food supply and it's in that clear bottle in your pantry, is we send our bodies into this pro-inflammatory state, because the linoleic acid, the main component of seed oils, is an omega-6 fatty acid. It is actually essential to our body. It's an
Mhm.
essential fatty acid. We can't live without it, but we only need about a gram per day, okay, which we get from whole foods. But when you eat it by the tablespoon, all of a sudden your amount of omega-6 fatty acid in your body is very high. And omega-6 fatty acids' job in the body biologically is to promote inflammation. Omega-3 fatty acids' job is to turn down inflammation. So omega-6 and omega-3s play this yin and yang relationship with each other. But we get very little omega-3 fatty acids in our diet, and we get massive amounts of omega-6 fatty acids from seed oil. And so we end up in this pro-inflammatory state. And if you remember, pretty much all degenerative diseases, including cardiovascular and neurodegenerative diseases, arthritis, all this is from systemic inflammation. It has its roots in systemic inflammation.
And I was surprised many years ago when I was doing testing, my doctor and I working on my own blood panels, and he tested for the omega-6s versus omega-3s. And I had a pretty fair amount of omega-6 in there. For me, I was like, where did that come from? And I realized it's in crackers. It's
Oh
in
yeah.
baked good. It's and I'm a cracker
All
fanatic. I'm not
processed food
anymore, but
has, yeah.
that was my snack of choice. I'm a salty, crunchy person. And so I really started focusing on where all of these things are hiding, where are these seed oil type things hiding. And then, like you said, not only do we bake with it, people fry their food in it. Canola
Mhm.
oil became some savior for the
Yeah.
longest time because it was
I
the
can't believe
healthy
it's not
oil.
butter.
Oh
It was like,
gosh.
yeah,
Yeah.
I-
Grew up, my mom used margarine like so many mothers
yeah.
from that
And that was
generation.
almost pure trans fat, which
Mm,
was the
that's another
cardiovascular
thing.
carnage from trans fat is uh, horrendous.
Yeah.
And those were just banned 7 years ago,
I
Greg.
know. Isn't it amazing how long it
Yeah.
took for them to, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so seed oils. This is my recommendations on seed oils. Avoid them in your house. Don't take whatever that bottle of vegetable oil is in your pantry, throw it out, compost it, make a candle out of it, whatever you want to do. Just don't put it in your body.
Yeah.
Okay. And start using olive oil, avocado oil, ghee, grass fed butter, tallow, if you can get it. These are all saturated fats, which are and monounsaturated fats, which are actually very healthy for your body and are not and will resist oxidation, meaning they don't oxidize. Seed oils will. And the oxidation of these fats is like basically the most crucial part of why they hurt our bodies. So I say, get them out of your house. Now, what about going out? You're eating salads with probably a
Hmm.
vegetable oil, seed vinaigrette. Every once in a while, your friends and you want to get some fries. You want to have a steak at a restaurant. They cook that in seed oil. You want to eat a package of crackers because you just need a quick snack. These things are all have seed oils in them. And people ask me, Shul, so should I just become like totally a monk and not enjoy any of this stuff outside the house? And I say, no, don't do that, because you need social connection. You need enjoyment in life. And yes, these seed oils are ubiquitous in the world, but if you take them out of your house, that is probably the biggest step you can do. And then when you're outside the house, it's fairly unavoidable. I wouldn't say you should glorify gluttony and just go hog wild, but and you should be smart, but don't be a monk either, and avoid having that birthday cake at your friend's party because it might have some canola oil in it. You shouldn't do that, because I think that ends up causing more harm than good in the end. One thing you can do is take a high quality omega-3 supplement, because what that does is, even if you're getting some omega-6 when you're out of the house, too much omega-6 when you're out of the house, taking omega-3 kind of shifts the balance back to fairly normal. So if you aim for about a gram of EPA in your omega-3 fatty acid per day, you're going to be much closer to a 4-to-1 or a 2 to 3 to 1, 2 or 3 to 1 omega-6 omega-3 ratio.
Yeah, I just want to make a note about oils that you might have in your house. Some people don't go through a bottle of oil very quickly. They don't bake or they're not frying. And I just want to mention that if you ever open a bottle of oil and it smells funny, it means that it's already rancid. It doesn't take much for these oils to get rancid, especially because they're in clear bottles, which is
Yeah.
why when you buy a good olive oil, you see it's in a dark bottle because they
Yeah.
understand that the light is going to degrade it. So just a word of caution, if you open nuts and they smell bad, if you open crackers and it's got some kind of funky smell, it's probably rancid already, so throw them
Yeah.
out. Don't eat them.
And I would say, Greg, even the ones that don't smell bad often are highly rancid. It's just the nature of these highly polyunsaturated fats, like
Mm.
vegetable oils, that they are highly susceptible to oxygen, light, heat,
Mm.
like you just mentioned, light, and the amount of, and they oxidize at body temperatures within your body as well,
Oh, interesting. I didn't
which
know
leads
that.
to cardiovascular disease and all sorts of metabolic dysfunction, all sorts of bad stuff. Yeah, I would just say that vegetable oil just shouldn't, seed oil, which is seed oils, just shouldn't be in your home. Just get them out of your home. It's easy,
It
you
really
know?
is. It's not a
Yeah.
big expenditure to replace a bottle with another bottle of something else.
And don't be afraid of saturated fat. That's the other
I
thing I
was
would say.
just going to say, so
Yeah.
now it leads me right perfectly into what's your take on sat fat?
So saturated fat is the most inert fat that you can put in your body. And what I mean by inert is it just doesn't oxidize, it doesn't react, because a saturated fat has no double bonds. And the double bonds in a fat are where the oxidation reactions occur that
Hmm.
cause them to get damaged and then stimulate inflammation in your body. Saturated fat has none.
Hmm.
So they're essentially resistant to oxidation in your body. Saturated fats are essentially what we lived on for almost all of human history.
Right.
And even in recent history, even in our ancestral history, if we go back to our grandparents, they were eating mostly saturated fat in the early 1900s. So this whole high polyunsaturated fat world is fairly new. Now, why have saturated fats been villainized? If they're not bad for you, why have they been villainized? It all goes back to this epidemiologist named Ansel Keys in the 1960s and 70s, who was convinced that saturated fat was causing heart disease. And so he designed a study called the 7-country study, which cherry picked data to prove his hypothesis. And scientific consensus got behind him, and the bandwagon took off. And later on, we had clinical trials and larger epidemiological studies that showed actually people who are eating saturated fat live longer and have less cardiovascular and all-cause mortality deaths compared to people who are eating seed oils, highly polyunsaturated fats.
Wow.
Yeah, and that but the tidal wave of scientific consensus had already swept over the world. And the world was then convinced that saturated fat was bad for you, even though we had been eating it since the dawn of time.
I remember reading about one experiment they did on rabbits in one of his studies, and they
Yeah.
fed rabbits all of this meat or a meat-like protein.
Yeah.
And so the rabbits got high cholesterol. Rabbits don't eat meat to begin with. They're a vegetarian animal.
Yeah.
And so it just screwed up their system and produced this reaction, which then they said,
Yeah.
see, here's the proof. These
Yeah.
rabbits are getting high
I mean,
cholesterol.
you think about it, the way we arrived on this cholesterol is bad for you, saturated fat is bad for you hypothesis, it was like drawing direct lines in a very complex system. In early autopsies, they'd look in their bodies and they'd see that their aortas and their coronary arteries had some yellow substance in it. They'd open it up and it was cholesterol in the artery wall. Then they fed these rabbits, and it was a Russian scientist, fed these rabbits a bunch of cholesterol high foods, and the rabbits developed cholesterol, even though they're obligate herbivores, meaning they are obligated to only eat plant matter. That's how their guts work. That's how they make energy. And all this kind of started pushing us down this connect the dots pattern of human biology, which human biology is hugely complex and doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So when contrary data started coming out saying that no, actually saturated fats doesn't cause heart disease and cholesterol is essential to human health, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, the tidal wave of scientific consensus was sweeping across the world. Governmental agencies were on board. Major agencies like the American Heart Association were on board. Scientists had staked their whole careers on this. They had grants and reputations and academic appointments. So changing the narrative, all of a sudden saying, oh, wait, we were wrong. Sorry. It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, which is a shame because I just think it's enjoyable to have an egg, a whole egg, and a piece of cheese and a nice piece of steak now and again.
Which are great foods, super nutrient dense, healthy foods.
Absolutely. I've always said I could not take a client as a coaching client who was vegan, not because I don't like vegans, but because I don't know how to keep them healthy. I truly don't know how. You could add all the beans and grains and supplements you want. I just didn't feel like that was my strength.
Yeah, if you look at veganism, I was actually vegan for 2 years, and it hurt me. It eroded my resilience, and I came to a period of like very stressful time with a surgical complication on myself, and I fell apart. It takes away your resilience because you don't get the micronutrients that you need that we rely on from animal foods. So I would say this: when you're deciding how to eat, look at how your ancestors eat. Were there any of our ancestors in the history of the human species that were ever vegan? No. Are there any traditional societies today that are vegan? No. Even half my family are Hindus and they're completely vegetarian, but you better bet they eat tons of ghee, tons of curd, yogurt, tons of milk products. And without it, they can't survive on their diet. They'll become nutrient deficient very quickly.
Yeah, I interviewed a woman a couple of years ago who, young, in her 30s, she became vegan and then had some stress with grad school and this and that and got very depressed and it spiraled out from there. And I guess she had a friend who was in med school, and they were like, let's just try you on a little bit of butter or whatever. And she just started to feel so much better. Her depression lifted, she was able to manage the stress. She was still in grad school, but it was a much easier time for her. So now she actually is a coach who helps recovering vegans get back their health,
There's
which
a
is
large group of recovering vegans, unfortunately.
yeah, kind of recovering Catholics, which I am. I think we've covered a good number of topics. What do you want to leave people with?
My motto is question everything. It's this little sign I have behind me because I really don't think you should just take what people tell you as the truth. You need to look into it yourself. It's essential for basically developing your constructs of truth and what's right and wrong and what's best for you. It's crucial to developing that in your mind. That's what I do. I go through these complex health topics. I've always done that. Figure things out. Try to understand the literature. I try to understand ancestral traditions. I try to take a common sense look at things. And then I put it together into a probabilistic truth. And then I apply actionable steps that I can use to improve my life and my family's life with it. And I was doing that for a while. And I finally said, hey, why don't I do this for everyone else too? And so I started the Dr. Kumar Discovery Podcast. And that's my podcast where I do these deep dives on health topics, complex but relevant health topics, so that people can basically get a more clear, understandable look at these health topics and decide how to go forward with their own health. And you know what I really think is knowledge is power, and I just want to give knowledge and information to people.
I love that idea. That's what I'm here for. The website is Dr. Kumar, Kumar, discovery.com. And I don't know who, you have a zillion blog posts there and little tidbits of information about, I don't know how many categories, maybe 20 different categories of health. So if anybody listening wants to deep dive with Dr. Ravi and not have him operate on your head, I would go to his website or listen to his podcast. Because I did ask you earlier, you're still doing surgery. Is that the most fascinating thing, brain surgery?
It is. It's very fascinating. I fell in love with the central nervous system early in medical school, and it's one of the greatest privileges of my life too. When someone who needs help allows me to enter their body and try to fix their brain or spine, it's a great privilege, and it's something I love and appreciate.
I can hear that appreciation in your voice. So thank you very much for being with me. I really appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. People, I'll be back next week with another fabulous guest. Be well till then.